Hi, this is Mark Long and welcome to this episode of The Long Riders. In this installment, I'm going to talk a little bit about the 3 keys to success in my class. And to be honest, in most of the classes that you're going to take in the course of your college career as well. Now look, the first thing I have to say is I will never speak as the font or fount of all wisdom, from which I never made a mistake, and so everyone should follow my illustrious example in order to achieve greater enlightenment and success in life. Instead, it's kind of like I did absolutely everything wrong that a person could do. So it's kind of like, look at me, listen to what I have to say, and then do the exact opposite of what I did. And that's probably the best advice that I could probably give you. So, what are the 3 keys to success? First, you have to show up. Secondly, you have to be prepared when you do show up. And third, you have to be prepared to contribute and collaborate and engage when you show up. Look, people, it's just the way it is. Learning is not a spectator sport. Learning is a contact sport. So, what do I mean when I say the first key to success is showing up? Well, it's just that simple, people. You have to show up. Look, when I was at school at UT down in Austin, I decided that I was going to take French as my foreign language. So I signed up for first semester French. I think I went about halfway through the semester, quit going to class, hung in past the drop date, and ended up flunking that semester. And I'm like, well, but I already made it through half of the class. Surely I'll do better the second time. Well, my work ethics and work habits were no better the second, third, and fourth time that I took and failed Intro to French. In fact, I don't even think I went to French the fourth time I took it even once, because I don't even remember who that teacher was. And after 2 years of not going to French class, I knew like 4 words in one phrase. I knew like fromage, le chat, le chapeau, la chateau, and one phrase, plus cha chose, c'est plus la même chose. The more things change, the more they stay the same, which did seem oddly appropriate. And I didn't even learn that in a French class. I just learned that from an old Rush album. So, you gotta show up. The second key to success, once you're going to class on a regular basis, is to be prepared when you go to class on a regular basis. Now look, I know this isn't rocket science, but for some people like me, I had to figure out things the hard way. At the same time that I was not tearing it up in my Intro to French classes, I also happened to be taking a British literature course where one of the people we were reading was William Blake and his Marriage of Heaven and Hell with the Proverbs of Hell. So I really took that to heart. And I was like, no bird flies too high that soars on its own wings. And the fox curses the trap and not himself. And if the fool persisted in his folly, he would become wise. And so instead of prepping for my class and being prepared on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 9 a.m. in the morning, I spent most of, if not all of my free time, plus some, persisting in my folly, soaring too high on my own wings, and cursing the trap and not myself. And at one point, my professor even told me one morning when I came in and he was taking roll, Mr. Long, it looks like you don't wake up until 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I kind of shrugged. I took a little break to gather myself, and when I came back, more ungathered than I was before, my professor asked me a question, and I didn't really know the answer to it because I didn't even know what we were reading at that point in the semester. And he goes, Mr. Long, you're woefully unprepared. And why haven't you been to class in the last week? And so I said, well, my grandmother, she died, or something. I mean, I said that, or something. Because like, I thought I was really funny. And the class laughed. And it wasn't until years later that I realized they were not laughing with me, they were laughing at me. And after the tittering died down, my instructor said, Mr. Long, it is just amazing how many grandmothers are dropping dead across the landscape at this point in the semester just like they do every semester. And he said, I want you to remember something else too. When you fail my class, never take me for another class again. And you know what? He was right. I did, and then I didn't. And eventually, I learned that lesson, which is it's not enough just to show up, but you have to be prepared when you show up. Now, key number 3. Once you're going to class on a regular basis, once you're prepared when you go to class on a regular basis, you also have to be willing to engage, interact, and collaborate with what's going on in the classroom. After 8 long years, my undergraduate career finally started to come to an end. The last summer I was there, I actually was a part of a program in the English department called Shakespeare at Wyandotte. And the professor in the department, Dr. Jim Ayers, would take 18 students out to some property the university owned out in the middle of nowhere in between Austin and Houston. And you would go out to this property, and over the course of 8 weeks, you would put together 3 productions of 3 Shakespeare plays from the ground up. When you went out there, all you needed to know were your lines. And at first, that seemed like the hard part, but actually that was the easy part. Because once you got out there, you discovered that there was no director, there was no stage manager, there was no blocking in any of the plays, but instead, we had to figure out as a group how every scene of every act of every play was going to work based on the words of the plays themselves. And we had to sew all our own costumes too. So, the first week we're out there, we were working on the play As You Like It. And I only had a small part in the play, and we were allowed to go through the old costume shop and put together costumes that we thought were appropriate for our character based on how we were interpreting them in the play. So we kind of slopped along through the first couple of acts of the play, and the theater was an old 19th century hay barn that had been converted with a stage, and it had a dirt floor, and Doc Ayers is sitting out there, the only person in a wooden folding chair watching us, impassively, because he looked kind of like the Thing and the Fantastic Four, kind of threatening and ominous, but not very talkative all at the same time. So we get through the first couple of acts of the play, and we sit down, and we're like, okay, we did it. Wyandott's kind of a big deal down around UT in some circles, and we're like, yay, we're part of the tradition now, we're doing it. And Doc Ayers doesn't really say anything until he tells the guy, John, who was playing Orlando, the lead, to get up on stage. So John gets up on stage. Doc says, look at that boy up on stage. And so we looked at the boy. And Doc has this real kind of laconic, Texan, kind of mean drawl going on. And he goes, what can you tell me about John's character based on the costume that he has put together? And as soon as Doc said that, I just had a bad feeling. I mean, I had a bad feeling that there was a trap being laid there. And I made a very conscious decision at that exact moment that no matter what happened and what was said, I was not going to say a single word, no matter what, until the whole scene had played itself out. So Doc says, what can you tell us about Orlando, his character, based on the way he's dressed? So how was John dressed? John had very pale, blonde, curly hair. He had a white headband on. He had a white Fruit of the Loom t-shirt on. He had white tights on, which underneath you could see his white BVDs. He had white high-top tennis shoes on as well. John was white. He was the whitest white boy the world had ever seen. So the answers start slowly trickling out. And so people start with the obvious. He's white. And they move on to he's pure, he's the hero, good will triumph over evil. Finally, someone said, he's like the Lone Ranger. And John is happy. John is smiling. John is like, look at me, look at me. My costume has been so evocative in portraying the character of Orlando and As You Like It. And so things kind of trickle off. And of course, I haven't said anything. And Doc kind of sighs and he says, well, I find that real interesting that y'all got so much out of John and his character based on the way he's dressed. Because all I see is a boy on stage in his underwear. And there's silence, and like we all saw John's confidence just wither up and blow away out the top of the barn, never to be seen again. And then Doc goes off, and he's like, John, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? Do you think that Shakespeare is so simplistic that you don't need to know anything other about the characters other than just like having a name and a color scheme on a 3x5 card? And that's all you need to know to understand the character. John, is that what you think? And John's like, well, no, that's not what I think. And Doc says, well, what were you thinking? And John's like, I don't know. I guess I wasn't thinking. And Doc's right. You know what? You weren't thinking. And you know what you were thinking? You were thinking that you were going to slop some kind of crappy, superficial interpretation on that character, and that eventually I was going to take pity on you, and I was just going to tell you what it is that you needed to do. And he goes, not only am I not going to tell you what it is you need to do, you are also going to be ruining all the hard work being put in by everybody else out here. Do you understand that? And I'm like going, whoa, I have no idea what we're doing, but I'm glad I'm not the one on the stage right now. And of course, I'm keeping my mouth shut. And Doc's like, y'all are all so weak. The earlier classes, they had the guts. They had the verb. They knew what needed to be done. But all of y'all are just spoiled. You've been told you're smart your whole life, and you just believed it. And you just think you don't even have to work to do anything. It's just disgusting. Does anybody have anything to say? And of course, for a moment, nobody had anything to say. And then John raises his hand and says, I'd like to say something. And I'm like, whoa, baby, here we go. And John says, I just want to apologize. I thought I was doing the right thing. Obviously, I wasn't. I really need to rethink what I'm doing. But he goes, it's still just the first week in the summer. And I know that if we all pull together, we can really turn this thing around and we can have the best summer ever. And it was like Andy Hardy movies when he's like, do you think we can put on this show? And everybody's like, yeah, I know we can put on this show. And everyone's like, yay, John, you're so right. We can do it. We can turn it around. Go team, go. Not me. I'm like, I'm not going to say a word until all this plays out to the end. So this dies down and Doc looks at John. He looks at everyone sitting there in the barn, and he says, well, you know what? I think pretty speeches are real pretty. But what counts is the work that you're willing to do. And that's all I really have to say to you. And we're going to get to work tomorrow. And with that, he gets up and spins on his heel and starts to march out of the barn to his Bronco that's parked outside so he can go off to his little cottage that's like buried off in the corner of the property like Shrek's house. That it's out there somewhere, but you really don't want to find it. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm going, I'm a man. I am a man. M-A-N. Man. Nobody punked me. I came out smelling like a rose. But then Doc Ayers gets right to the edge of the barn door and he spins on his heel again and he just says, "And by the way, I just want to say how proud I am of all you people that were too chicken shit to even say anything at all." And with that, then he got in his Bronco, tore out, and drove away. And you know what? Once again, like most of the other lessons I learned about how to do well, not just in college, but how to do well in life, like I said, you don't get to sit on the sidelines. You don't get to pick and choose when you engage and don't engage. You're in it up to your neck from the beginning all the way to the very end. Life and learning are not spectator sports, they are contact sports.